What marks the difference between a crumpled sheet of loose leaf and origami? What elevates some scrap found on the side of the road to the status of sculpture? Why are some artworks appraised like treasure while others are treated like trash? In other words, what is art and what is disposable, and how do the two overlap? Ultimately, art, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. Distinction can be made on the basis of intention. Say, a child's unintelligible scrawls cannot be as valuable as the flitting brushstrokes of an abstract artist. However, an artwork can touch you deeply without any context of the artist's intention behind it. In some cases, even, the most resonant elements of an artwork are completely accidental, actively working against the artist's intent. So the true difference between art and the disposable simply comes down to whether or not something is meaningful to whoever happens to be observing it. However, the art world, perennially infested with elitist threshold guardians and commercialists, typically does not adhere to the eye of the beholder principle. Critics and buyers liberally apply the label of disposable to the majority of humanity's creative efforts. Perhaps the most egregious example of this is the practice of graffiti removal. Artwork created in public spaces, motivated purely by self-expression and shirking any monetary gain, is considered repulsive and corrosive to property values and is thus criminalized and erased routinely. There are certain art world phenomena that successfully challenge this tendency towards gatekeeping. For instance, Marcel Duchamp's experimental fountain eked out the found objects genre, but not without first facing much controversy and derision. Artworks that utilize found objects force us to reappraise the everyday materials that surround us. Another such phenomenon is the category of outsider art, brought to the mainstream by artist and collector Jean Dubuffet, who also defined the genre as art brut. Outsider art is a nebulous term broadly used to refer to the work of artists who lack professional training or are relatively uninfluenced by the canon. Many of the foundational outsider artists have been characterized by their struggles with mental health, and most did not receive widespread attention or profit from their art within their lifetimes. However, since the inception of the movement, outsider art has grown in popularity and, at this point, is sanctioned by the art world, problematizing the use of the term outsider. Nonetheless, both outsider art and found art challenge our deep-seated notions of the relationship between art and commerce. The arc of dismissal to mainstream recognition is perhaps most clearly illustrated by the Ashcan School, an informal movement in early 1900s New York. The loose collective of artists who made up the Ashcan School were not unified by style or voice, but rather a rebellious nature and intent on depicting realistic urban scenes. The term Ashcan originated from critics who were scandalized by the artist's depictions of promiscuous characters and rubbish-littered city streets. Ashcan is an antiquated term for trash bins. Ashcan painters, most of whom had backgrounds as newspaper illustrators and favored a spontaneous anti-academic approach, were amused by the label and embraced it. The highest profile artist to be considered a member of the Ashcan School is Edward Hopper, although he did not associate himself with the movement personally. The term Ashcan has also been used in reference to comic books, an often dismissed fine art medium. Ashcan comics were low-quality black and white books created solely to establish trademarks during the golden age of comic books of the 1930s and 40s. These books were not intended to be sold, doomed to the Ashcan after fulfilling their legal purpose, but remaining copies have since become rare and extremely valuable collector's items. The term has also been applied to filmmaking in reference to the phenomenon of studios producing films solely to preserve copyright without the intention of ever releasing them. The most famous example of an Ashcan film is Roger Corman's The Fantastic Four from 1994. As of late, the practice of Ashcan filmmaking is consumed to the film industry. For over a decade now, each year's list of highest-grossing films contain a slew of soulless and craftless star vehicles produced with the lone intention of perpetuating brand awareness. These films cost hundreds of millions of dollars to create and earn back billions, and yet they are, as works of art, lacking in meaning and essentially disposable. They are proof that the quality of an artwork has nothing to do with money or cultural cachet.